Let's move on to the fourth email today. And our fourth email today comes to us from George Lucas Fan, who writes, "Greetings, folks. Ever since the new trailer dropped, there has been a massive uptick in the Avengers theories flying around. And I'm part of that, actually. Last night we did like a 3-hour theories video based on the new trailer. There have been new theories flying around, including your excellent theories video. Well, there you go. Including your excellent theories video you did last night. Thank you so much, George. Anyway, I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on what you think are the best theories surrounding Endgame out there right now and the worst ones. Rob, we are hearing a hell of a lot of theories right now.
Yeah.
We're hearing a lot of theories going on in the world right now. And last night, like I said, we ended up doing a 3+ hour video of just talking about theories and all that kind of stuff. Let me put you on the hot seat here first.
Mm-hmm.
What are one or two of the best theories you've heard, and one or two maybe of the worst theories you've heard so far? What have you been hearing?
Well, I don't know if anybody, there's an old, it's not old, well, it's 1980, so I guess it's old, but there's a movie called The Final Countdown. And it's a movie, no, it's not that. It's a movie where the USS Nimitz, the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, captained by Kirk Douglas, goes back in time right before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. So you have modern jets and modern military equipment right before the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and they have to decide, do we attack the Japanese fleet and prevent Pearl Harbor from happening? And I love this movie when I was a kid, and of course it deals with time travel and things that happen at the end. I was thinking about those kinds of things. My friend Larry Young, who's a Facebook friend of mine, posited a theory yesterday that I love. And he says, what if there's time travel involved, that at the end of Endgame, that it's actually Bucky who gets frozen and sent forward, and Cap and Steve Rogers ends up staying behind in the 40s with Carter, Agent Carter. They found SHIELD. They're able to stop the Hydra infiltration of SHIELD, preventing Hydra from pulling all of its shenanigans and therefore changing the MCU. Bucky becomes the new Captain America. And the universe as we know it, the MCU, is changed, but it allows Captain America peace and the love that he didn't get by being lost in time, by being frozen. And so we have a new MCU where a lot of it is the same, but Steve Rogers is able to be retired. So we have a new Cap, and he gets to live the life that he's earned through the last 10 years of the MCU that was taken away from him. And of all my Endgame theories, I'm like, I love this. I love the fact that the universe could be changed, the sacrifice would not be negated, and one of our favorite characters gets to actually live happily ever after the way he haplessly has been living throughout the last 10 years of the MCU. And that was my favorite theory that I've heard about. Now, it doesn't explain anything else about how the snap is going to be. It just is a way that history could be changed. And it reminded me of The Final Countdown. And I'm not going to say why, but it to me, it's what time travel movies do best, in that you can still have the adventure. It happened, but all of the sacrifice and all of the tragedy that led up to that point isn't swept away. But it's just people do, when history gets changed, they get their just desserts, and we as an audience feel satisfied. And when I heard that story, I was like, wow, dude, I haven't heard that, because I watched these theory videos, and that to me was romantic. It was nice. It's a way that Chris Evans can leave the MCU with honor, and nobody would go, oh, fuck that guy, I don't want that. They would be happy. You'd leave with a smile on your face, and you'd feel love in your heart. So that was something I heard yesterday that I haven't stopped thinking about, and I love that theory.
I've during the 3-hour thing yesterday, a lot of people threw in a lot of theories about Cap going back. Right. Whether it's just he goes back and gets to be with Peggy and a lot of different variations. I haven't heard that variation of it's Buck who goes into the ice instead. Yeah. That's a new twist on it. That's interesting. Here's my problem, though, with it. We're all familiar with Flashpoint. And basically, the underlying message of Flashpoint is that when you change anything in the past,
Sure.
you could create a future that's 10 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're doing something a small thing that is good, you could end up ruining the world by doing it, right? And I remember talking to people, I'm like, look, if Cap goes back, it ruins the timeline. Like it causes chaos in the timeline. Because just think about this, and then our minds start to go crazy. Peggy, okay, so let's say Cap goes back. Well, Bucky ain't Steve Rogers. But let's say he goes back. In the timeline that holds the world together, Peggy moved on after Steve went down into the ice. She got married. She had a life. Now, just imagine that one small change. That one small change causes a domino effect in time that could be catastrophic. Now, this guy who was supposed to marry Peggy, he doesn't marry Peggy. And something goes on with his life. And then people he gets involved with, he was never supposed to get involved with. And it creates this cascading domino effect. Like I used to talk about this.
The butterfly effect.
Yes, creates a massive butterfly effect that could ripple through and just cause chaos and world destruction and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. That's why, and who knows, maybe Marvel won't abide by that, those classically held ideas about changing the past and all that kind of stuff. Maybe they'll, look, Flashpoint is DC, whatever, we don't need to abide by that. Change history however you want. History, schmistery, whatever. Let's create the world we want to create. Maybe. But it's the one thing that holds me back. But the one thing about the Bucky or about the Steve going back, the one thing that gives that a little bit of credence, though, is the fact that, hey, look, in the last trailer for Endgame, we do see him holding that picture of Peggy, right? In this new thing of Endgame, we hear Peggy's voice. Now, that ultimately probably means nothing. But if you're somebody who wants to believe in the theory that maybe at the end of this, Steve goes back, I think these things in the trailer, well, I don't think this is what it means. You would not be crazy to look at these things and go, this could be an indication of something to come. For him going back in time and back in history, it could mean that. The second problem I have, though, with any notion of Steve going back is this. It closes the door on Chris Evans coming back. Like, even if you say he dies in Endgame, this is the MC Nobody Dies You, right? This is the MC Fake Deaths You is what I call it, the MCFU. Like, nobody really dies. So even if he dies in Endgame, he can come back in like 3 years. He can be back. That's no big deal. And Chris Evans has said publicly, I will continue to play Captain Marvel or Captain America as long as they want me to play Captain America.
Right.
So I have no doubt, even if he lives or dies at the end of this movie, he'll be back. So I don't know. It's an interesting one. I'll tell you one, though, that I heard that I love. Because not only do I love, I think it's so good, I've bought into it. I think this is going to happen. And it's this, that in Endgame, when the movie, in the first act of the film, the Avengers have been looking all year for Thanos. They've been trying to figure out where Thanos is. And they've got Captain Marvel with them. And they've got Thor. And Thor's got the power of the Bifrost now. And he can go anywhere and blah, blah, blah. And that they've been holding on to the hope that we need to get Thanos and we need to force him to undo what was done. One way or the other. That's the hope they've been clinging to. And then that scene of Thor showing up on the world where Thanos is now retired, he shows up there, probably with Captain Marvel with him. But he shows up there and they see Thanos, and this is the whole hope of the film, and this is all in the first act, and basically Thanos is, feel free to take it, the gauntlet doesn't work anymore. And because that would explain why the Russo brothers mentioned in the Infinity War commentary saying the gauntlet is now permanently damaged. So they had all their hope completely vested in this whole idea that we're going to find Thanos and we're going to fix this. And they find Thanos only to find out they still can't fix it. And that becomes the true spiritual beginning of the movie, that now all hope is gone. Now you see Captain America and you see Black Widow and everybody in utter despair. And that's what we're seeing in the trailer. So they find Thanos, and that's all of Thanos' involvement in this movie, is a little bit in the first act when they find him and he basically gives them the bad news. Look, even if I want to, which I don't, you can't undo this. You can't do it with the gauntlet. The gauntlet's useless now, blah, blah, blah. And that sets in the depression that we see. I think before that happens, they're still hopeful. We've got a mission. We're going to fix this. Then once they find him and they realize everything we pinned all of our hopes on is gone. And then just as they're hitting the bottom, Scott Lang shows up. Paul Rudd shows up. And the way they described it, I'm like, yeah, I totally see that happening. I love this theory. And not only do I love it, I think it's actually going to happen. And I bought into it. And Rob, one other thing, and I want your commentary on this because you probably know more about this, but we all know that in the comics with Infinity Wars in the comics, that at one point Nebula gets her hands on the gauntlet, and it becomes a problem. Nebula gets her hands on the gauntlet. I have never thought that they would actually do that, because to me, Nebula's never been a significant enough character in the MCU to wield the gauntlet. But the more I think about it, and some people brought this up yesterday, and they've started to win me over, the more I think about it, out of all the characters that survived the snap, why Nebula? Why is Nebula still there? Why is she featured in the trailers? Why is she marching along beside Tony Stark as the Avengers are going out, blah, blah, blah? Don't you think, John, that maybe that suggests she's got a bigger role to play? And I was like, you know what? Maybe. I'm starting to get convinced. These crazy people are starting to convince me that at some point Nebula's going to be wielding an Infinity Gauntlet. Now, that goes completely in contradiction with the first theory we were just talking about, that the Infinity Gauntlet's useless, but I'm buying into that. So what do you think about that theory that people are talking about, that Nebula at one point wields this gauntlet?
Well, first of all, I think what you said about this theory about the beginning of the movie is a very sound theory, because as you've always said, there doesn't necessarily have to be a big bad in this movie. The situation itself is the true situation that needs to be fought against. And I could see that. And like, just when we're at the worst, you know, we find out Thanos there's nothing they can do, and they're all depressed, and maybe a couple of years go by. You know, that's when you can have years passing, and then Scott Lang shows up.
By the way, what you just said is genius, because that would explain, if that happened, and we're just speculating here,
right,
but if that happened, that's genius, because that would explain why in half of this trailer, Widow has blonde hair, and in half of this trailer, she's got red hair. If they did another time jump in there, that explains that transition.
Yeah,
You're a brilliant man. Please continue.
Well,
More brilliance.
They can even have a card. There's a Legion of Superheroes run where one run ended and then another run began that Keith Giffen was doing, and the run just started a black page, and the first page of the comic was 5 years later. And then you had to figure out like what the hell was going on. And it dealt with time travel and the time trapper. And it was great. And I could see them doing something like that in this movie. But, you know, Nebula, we saw Nebula tortured by Thanos. Yeah. We actually saw, and one of the things I loved about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was a lot of people don't like it, but in my mind, it was all about how damaged families came together. And I think one of the things, that underrated things about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was how the relationship between Gamora and Nebula was shown to be, there was a repair that was beginning with them by the end of that movie. And they are the daughters of Thanos, after all. And I think that, you know, Nebula making her conversion from being an evil person who was bent on destruction and the death of her father, maybe her redemption is found. Maybe it's her, you know, she might be the ones that she sacrifices her life to bring her sister back somehow and to undo what her father has done. And it's a great moment of her own redemption, and they've kept her in these movies. And I could see that maybe she does wield a gauntlet. Maybe, you know, Peter Dinklage, we saw that there's another gauntlet, you know, he could forge another one. You know, I don't think the Infinity Stones themselves, you can destroy those. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot. And what I like about what we're discussing now is all of these things are very satisfying on an emotional level.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is a story that doesn't rely on a battle. You know, so even though I'm sure there's going to be a battle royale in this, but it revolves around emotion and heart and what is true heroism. And I think if this is the way this movie is going to go, if this is the way Marvel is going to stick this Endgame landing and leave us, they're going to hit us in the feels as opposed to go for our bloodlust and our thirst for a giant Return of the Jedi-esque space battle, except with superheroes.
What would you say then are some of the, maybe one of the worst theories that you've heard? Like, have you heard some, I mean, we've all heard many bad ones, but if you had to try to pick off the top of your head.
God, I don't know. I can't think of one that's, because I don't pay any attention to the ones that I think are ludicrous. You know, I mean, I don't know. I can't think of a bad one. I really can't. But this, what we've come up with now, just listening to you talk, and like, this to me seems like the most satisfying, what we've just discussed, of all of these theories. But then it doesn't get into what's happening with all the other characters. You know, there's so many other people that are going to need to play a satisfying role, like Rocket, for instance. You know, Rocket has been on the trajectory of finally accepting himself, and we kind of saw him being a sad sack, and like his conversation with Thor was amazing, and then how he was treated in Guardians 2, he kind of became a sad character. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I want to see all of these characters sort of. I don't know. I don't know what the worst. I can't think of one right now.
Dude, I heard a bad one that just made me mad.
Say it. I want to hear it.
It revolves around Jane, Thor's Natalie Portman.
Don't even start. Because, tell me anyway.
Remember, there was an argument that she was to a degree infused with the power of one of the stones at one point, and that she is actually, I can't remember because I dismissed it so quickly out of my head, but the whole notion is that Jane reappears in this, and that ultimately she's the one who takes down everything. And this person was like damn convinced of it, that they had heard a report that Natalie Portman was secretly on the set of Avengers, which I had never heard that before. And that it was like, oh my God, there's just, but that's the thing. But again, that's part of the fun thing about movies like this, right? We can think of the most outrageously outlandish shit.
But see, not to poo-poo our viewers, but that wouldn't be at all satisfying. Like if she would suddenly
unless
become
you loved that character.
What's that?
Unless you loved that character. If you were somebody who loved that character.
I mean, I love Natalie Portman. I mean, especially after her rap songs on Saturday Night Live, she can do no wrong.
Those are great.
But it's like you can't. It's bad storytelling. You know, you don't get us involved and invested in everything that's going on. You already have this huge group of characters, and we're already wondering. Like Natalie Portman might show up, and I'm like, I don't care. I want to know what's happening to Spider-Man. You know, you've got to finish the story that you're starting, and that would be too disruptive. I mean, when you're thinking about how these filmmakers are thinking, bringing back Jane, the Russo brothers have never even dealt with her as a character. So why would they suddenly do that at the end when they've already got all of these other much more important characters than her? I mean, Pepper Potts should wield the gauntlet or deal with something before Jane does.
I agree. All right, guys, listen, I'm sure you guys have a lot of things. Jump down in the comments. What is the best theory you've heard? What's the worst theory you've heard? Jump down in the comments and let us know what you think.